Tuesday, June 8, 1954, 10 p.m., Nicky Barnes walked into the First Policy Bank on 135th Street with 4 men behind him and a .38 revolver in his jacket. He was 21 years old, ambitious as hell, and convinced that Bumpy Johnson was past his prime. The old man was 49, had done time in Alcatraz, had health problems everyone whispered about. Nicky figured this was his moment, his chance to take what Bumpy couldn't hold anymore. The Policy Bank was a small storefront operation. Mrs. Chen ran it, had for 15 years, collecting numbers bets from Harlem residents who dreamed of hitting big. She was counting the day's receipts when Nicky walked in.
"We're closed," Mrs. Chen said without looking up. "I know," Nicky said. "That's why I'm here." Mrs. Chen looked up, saw the gun, understood immediately. "Bumpy Johnson ain't going to like this. Bumpy Johnson don't scare me. Now open the safe." Mrs. Chen was 70 years old. She'd survived the Depression, survived 2 wars, survived 40 years in Harlem. She wasn't scared of a kid with a gun, but she also wasn't stupid. She opened the safe. $18,000 inside, the week's take from the policy operation. Nicky's men grabbed it, stuffed it into a duffel bag. "Tell Bumpy this is just the beginning," Nicky said. "Tell him Harlem's got new management coming." They hit 2 more policy banks that night. Same method. Walk in after closing, gun out, take the money, leave a message. By midnight, Nicky Barnes had stolen $47,000 from Bumpy Johnson's operations, and everyone in Harlem knew it. Wednesday morning, Illinois Gordon got the calls. 3 policy banks hit. All the weekly receipts gone. He drove straight to Bumpy's apartment on 145th Street, knocked on the door at 7:30 a.m. May answered. "Illinois, what's wrong?" "I need to see Bumpy. It's urgent." Bumpy was having coffee in the kitchen, reading the newspaper. He looked up when Illinois walked in. "Boss, we got a problem. Somebody hit 3 of our policy banks last night. Walked in after closing, took all the money. $47,000 total." Bumpy set down his coffee cup slowly. "Who?" "Kid named Nicky Barnes, 21 years old. Been operating small time out of a warehouse in the Bronx. Runs with a guy named Guy Fisher. Smart kids, ambitious. Last night they decided to go big." "Why my banks? Why not hit the Italians or the independents?" "Because they think you're weak, boss. They think age and Alcatraz slowed you down. They think this is their moment to move up." Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. May sat down at the table, watching her husband's face. She'd been married to him for 20 years. She could read every expression. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking that in the old days this would be simple. Kid steals from me, I make an example. Body in the river, message sent. But I'm tired, May. Tired of the violence. Tired of the wars. Tired of making enemies when I could be making allies. So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to meet this Nicky Barnes. I'm going to look him in the eye, and I'm going to decide if he's worth killing or worth keeping." Illinois looked confused. "Boss, you're not going to hit him back? Everyone's expecting war. If you don't respond, people are going to think..." "People are going to think I'm weak. I know. Let them think that for now. Set up a meeting with this Nicky Barnes. Neutral ground. Small's Paradise. Friday afternoon. Just him and me. No crews, no guns, just a conversation." "What if he refuses?" Then we do this the old way, but give him the option first. Tell him Bumpy Johnson wants to talk. Tell him it's about business, not revenge. Tell him to come alone and unarmed, and he'll leave the same way. Illinois left to set up the meeting. May poured Bumpy more coffee. You're going to try to recruit him, aren't you? If he's worth recruiting. He just stole $47,000 from the most powerful man in Harlem. That takes either stupidity or courage. If it's stupidity, I'll eliminate him. If it's courage, I'll use it. What if it's both? Then I'll teach him the difference. Bumpy spent Wednesday and Thursday learning everything he could about Nicky Barnes. He called in favors, talked to informants, read reports. What he learned was interesting. Nicky Barnes wasn't just another street punk. He was smart, strategic. He'd been watching Bumpy's operations for 6 months, studying the pattern, identifying weaknesses. He'd chosen the 3 policy banks carefully, all in areas where Bumpy's security was thinnest. He'd hit them after closing, when the money was counted, but before it was transferred to the main safe. Perfect timing, maximum take, minimal risk. And he'd left messages specifically designed to provoke. This wasn't a desperate brab. This was a calculated challenge. A young lion testing an old lion, seeing if the king still had teeth. He's good, Bumpy told Frank Lucas Thursday night. Frank had been working for Bumpy for 2 years now, learning the business, watching how the old man operated. He's good enough that he should be working for you instead of against you. Maybe. That's what I'm going to find out. What if he says no? What if he wants war? Then we give him war. But Frank, you're going to learn something this week. War is expensive. War costs money, costs men, costs time. If you can avoid war by turning an enemy into an ally, that's not weakness. That's strategy. That's how you build an empire that lasts. But boss, he stole from you. Everyone knows it. If you don't hit back hard, people are going to test you. Everyone's going to think they can take a shot. Let them think that. The ones stupid enough to try will get dealt with. But the smart ones, the ones like Nicky Barnes, who might actually be worth something, I want them working with me, not against me. You understand the difference? Frank thought about it. You're playing a longer game. Always. Violence is a tool, but it's not the only tool. Sometimes the best move is to shake hands instead of throwing punches. Friday, June 11th, 3 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked into Small's Paradise alone. The club was empty except for the bartender and one customer sitting at a back table. Nicky Barnes, 21 years old, lean, sharp-dressed in a brown suit, confidence radiating off him like heat. Bumpy walked to the table, sat down without being invited. They looked at each other for a long moment. You Nicky Barnes? You know I am, and you're Bumpy Johnson, the legend, the king of Harlem, the man I just took $47,000 from. You did. That was bold. Stupid, but bold. Why stupid? I got the money. I sent a message. I showed everyone in Harlem that you're not untouchable. You showed everyone in Harlem that you're a good thief. That's not the same as showing them you're a good businessman. Nicky leaned back in his chair. So what happens now? You kill me? That's what everyone's expecting. That's what the old Bumpy Johnson would do. Make an example. Body in the river. Message sent. Maybe that's what I should do. But I didn't come here to kill you, Nicky. I came here to offer you something better. What could you possibly offer me? I already took your money. I'm offering you the chance to make that $47,000 look like pocket change. I'm offering you partnership." Nicky laughed. "Partnership? You're joking."
"Do I look like I'm joking?" Bumpy leaned forward. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, Nicky. I see a smart kid who's been watching my operations for months, who studied my weaknesses, who planned this hit perfectly, who executed it clean, who's got the balls to steal from me and then sit here alone in a room with me. That's not stupidity. That's talent. And talent is valuable. So you want to hire me? Make me one of your soldiers? No, I want to make you a partner. I want to give you territory. I want to teach you how to run it properly. I want to show you how to make real money, not just steal pocket change from policy banks."
"Why would you do that? I'm your enemy. I just robbed you." "You're my enemy right now, but you could be my ally. And I'd rather have you working with me than against me, because if you're against me, I have to destroy you. And that's a waste of your talent, a waste of my time, a waste of potential profit for both of us." Nicky was quiet, thinking, "What's the catch?" "No catch. Here's the deal. I'm getting older. I'm 49. I've got health problems. I've been running Harlem for 20 years, and I'm tired. I need people I can trust to help me run things. Smart people, strategic people, people who aren't afraid to take risks, but who know how to manage those risks." Nicky studied Bumpy's face, looking for deception, for weakness, for the trap. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm sitting here alone, unarmed, making you an offer instead of having Illinois Gordon put a bullet in your head. Because I've got nothing to gain by lying to you. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I'm offering you something better than death. I'm offering you a future. What makes you think I'm worth investing in? The same thing that made you think I was worth stealing from. Instinct. I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen hundreds of young men try to make it. Most of them die before they're 30. A few survive, and a very small number become something special. You might be that small number, or you might be another dead body. I'm offering you the chance to be the first one instead of the second." Nicky was quiet for a full minute. Bumpy waited, didn't push, didn't pressure, just sat there drinking his coffee, giving the kid time to think. Finally, Nicky spoke. "I want Guy Fisher in the deal. He's my partner, smart with money, good strategist. If I'm in, he's in. Fine. You both get the 135th Street corridor. You split it however you want. I don't care about the details. I care about the results. How do I know you won't just wait until I'm established and then take it all back?" "Because that's bad business. If I do that, word gets out. Nobody trusts me again. Nobody wants to work with me. I lose more than I gain. But if I keep my word, if I honor this deal, then other smart young guys like you see that working with Bumpy Johnson is better than working against him. That's how you build an empire, Nicky, not through fear, through reputation, through keeping your word. And the $47,000 I took? Keep it. Consider it your signing bonus. You earned it. You outmaneuvered me. That's worth something. But going forward, we're partners, not enemies. Partners share information, share protection, share profits. You understand? Nicky extended his hand across the table. We got a deal, but I'm watching you. You try to screw me, and You'll what? Try to steal from me again? Bumpy smiled. Nicky, if I try to screw you, you won't see it coming. That's why I'm not going to try. This deal is good for both of us. You make money, I make money. Harlem stays peaceful. Everybody wins. That's the goal. They shook hands, one firm grip, sealing an alliance that would reshape Harlem's underworld. The news spread through Harlem like wildfire. Bumpy Johnson and Nicky Barnes had made a deal. The kid who'd stolen $47,000 was now a partner, not a target. People didn't know what to make of it. Illinois Gordon didn't know what to make of it. Boss, people are confused. They expected war. They expected bodies. They're wondering if you've gone soft. Let them wonder, Bumpy said. They were in his office above Wells' restaurant, going over the details of the new arrangement. Soft is when you let people steal from you and do nothing. Smart is when you turn a thief into an asset. There's a difference. What if Nicky betrays you? What if this whole thing was a setup to get close to you? Then I'll have learned something about reading people. But I don't think that's going to happen. Nicky's ambitious, but he's not suicidal. He knows that betraying me would mean death. Not just his death. Everyone he loves. He's smart enough to understand that. So, what happens now? Now we make this partnership real. Set up a meeting. Me, Nicky, Guy Fisher, you, Willie, Frank. We map out the 135th Street territory. We establish rules. We create communication channels. We make sure everyone understands how this works. The meeting happened Sunday afternoon at Wells' restaurant. Private room. 6 men around a table. Map of Harlem spread out. Bumpy sat at the head. Nicky and Guy Fisher on one side. Illinois, Willie, and Frank on the other. Gentlemen, we're here to establish a new arrangement, Bumpy began. Nicky and Guy are taking over operations on 135th Street from Lenox to 8th Avenue. Policy banks, numbers, protection rackets. They'll run it independently, but under my umbrella. They keep 70% of profits. They pay 30% to me as tribute. In exchange, they get protection, connections, and knowledge. Guy Fisher spoke for the first time. He was 23, wore glasses, looked more like an accountant than a gangster. What kind of protection are we talking about? The Italian families won't touch you. The independent operators won't muscle in. The police who work with me won't raid your operations. Anyone who has a problem with you has a problem with me. That's the protection. And what do you get besides 30%? I get peace. I get a buffer zone between my core territory and the Bronx. I get 2 smart operators who can handle problems in an area I don't have time to manage anymore. And I get the satisfaction of not having to kill 2 talented young men who might be useful to me. Nicky leaned forward. What are the rules? What can't we do? 3 rules. 1. No heroin. I don't care what else you sell, but no heroin. Especially not to kids. That's non-negotiable. Break that rule, the deal's off, and you're dead. Agreed, Nicky said. 2.
You don't operate outside your territory without checking with me first. I'm giving you 135th Street. You want to expand, we talk first. You don't just grab new territory and hope I'm okay with it. Makes sense. 3. You pay your tribute on time. 30% of monthly gross, delivered to Freddie Myers first Monday of every month. You're late, we have a problem. You're late twice, we don't have a problem anymore because you're gone.
Guy Fisher pulled out a notepad, started writing. What's gross? Gross receipts before expenses or after? Before. You take your 70% and handle your expenses out of that. I don't care how you run your operation internally. Just deliver 30% of what comes in. What about startup costs? The first month or two, we're going to be establishing the operation. Heavy expenses, low profit. Bumpy thought about it. Fair point. First 3 months, you pay 20% instead of 30%. After that, it goes to 30%. That gives you time to get established without bleeding money.
That's generous, Guy said. It's smart. I want you to succeed. I don't want you struggling so hard that you get desperate and do something stupid. The better you do, the better I do. This is a partnership, not exploitation. Illinois pulled out 3 folders. These are the current operators in the 135th Street corridor. Mrs. Chen runs the main policy bank. Jimmy Washington handles numbers collection. Ray Lewis does protection. They all report to me right now. As of tomorrow, they report to you.
How are they going to feel about that? Nicky asked. They're going to feel however they feel, but they'll work with you because I'm telling them to. You treat them with respect, they'll respect you. You treat them like servants, you'll have problems. These people have been working these streets for years. They know the territory. They know the customers. Listen to them. Learn from them. Don't come in like you know everything. Understood.
Frank Lucas spoke up. What happens if someone from outside tries to move into the 135th Street territory? Do Nicky and Guy handle it alone, or do they call us? They handle it first, Bumpy said. But if it's too big for them to handle, they call. We back them up. That's what partnership means. You don't fight alone unless you want to. You've got the full weight of my organization behind you if you need it. And what if we succeed? What if we make 135th Street so profitable that we want to expand? Guy asked. Then we negotiate. Maybe I give you more territory. Maybe I increase your percentage. Maybe we restructure the whole deal. I'm not locking you into this forever. This is a starting point. You prove yourselves, we can talk about growth. Nicky looked at the map. What about the Italians? They're going to see 2 young black guys suddenly running a major territory. They're going to wonder if you're weak, if they can push. Let me worry about the Italians. I've got arrangements with them. They won't interfere. But here's something you need to understand about dealing with them. Respect their territory, like you want them to respect yours. Don't try to recruit their people. Don't undercut their prices. Don't start unnecessary conflicts. You can compete, but compete smart, not aggressive. That buys you advance warning on raids, protection from harassment, and quick releases if anyone gets arrested. Only $2,000 a month for 2 cops? That's all they want. They're not greedy, they're practical.
They get regular payments, they look the other way. You take care of them, they take care of you. You try to lowball them or skip payments, they'll make your life hell. Cops have long memories. The meeting went on for 3 hours. Details about collections, about handling disputes, about managing employees, about dealing with competition. Bumpy shared 20 years of knowledge. Nicky and Guy absorbed everything, asked smart questions, took notes. By the time they finished, the sun was setting over Harlem.
"One more thing," Bumpy said, as everyone was getting ready to leave. "This arrangement works because of trust. I'm trusting you to run this territory properly, to pay your tribute, to follow the rules, to not embarrass me. You break that trust, there's no second chance, no warnings, no negotiations. You just disappear. Everyone clear on that?" "Crystal clear," Nicky said. "Good. Then as of tomorrow morning, 135th Street is yours. Don't screw it up."
Monday morning, Nicky Barnes and Guy Fisher took control of the 135th Street corridor. They met with Mrs. Chen, Jimmy Washington, and Ray Lewis, introduced themselves, explained the new arrangement. All 3 longtime operators were skeptical at first. These were kids taking over from Bumpy Johnson's direct control. But Nicky and Guy were smart enough to listen instead of dictate. "We're not here to change everything," Guy told them. "You've been running these operations successfully for years. We want to learn from you. We want to make this transition smooth. You keep doing what you've been doing. We're just here to coordinate and handle the bigger picture."
Mrs. Chen relaxed a bit. "Mr. Johnson told me you're in charge now. He says you're smart boys. I hope he's right." "We hope he's right too," Nicky said honestly. "But we're going to prove it. We're going to make this territory more profitable than it's ever been. And when we do, everyone benefits. You'll get raises, better security, more resources. We take care of the people who take care of us." The first month was rough. Nicky and Guy were learning on the fly, making mistakes, correcting them. They had disputes with customers, problems with collections, issues with security. But they learned fast. And whenever they hit a problem they couldn't solve, they called Bumpy. One night, 3 weeks into the arrangement, a group of independent operators tried to muscle in on 135th Street. 5 guys from Brooklyn, thinking Nicky and Guy were too young to defend their territory. They started running their own numbers game, undercutting prices, stealing customers. Nicky wanted to handle it with violence, show up with guns, make an example. But he remembered what Bumpy had said. He called first. Bumpy met him at Wells' restaurant. "We got a problem. Brooklyn crew moving in, stealing our customers. What do I do?" "What do you want to do?" "I want to shoot them, send a message." "That's one option. What's another option?" Nicky thought about it. "I could offer them a deal, bring them in." "Why would you do that?" "Because 5 more guys means more coverage, more collection points, more revenue. If I kill them, I solve one problem, but I lose the opportunity they represent." Bumpy smiled. "Now you're thinking like a businessman. Go talk to them. Offer them jobs. They can work for you, make steady money, have protection. Or they can compete with you and deal with the consequences. Give them the choice. Most people pick the smart option when it's presented clearly." Nicky did exactly that. Met with the Brooklyn crew, offered them positions. 4 of the 5 accepted. The 5th refused,
tried to continue operating independently. That one disappeared within a week. The other 4 became Nicky's most loyal operators because he'd given them a chance instead of just killing them. By the end of the first 3 months, the 135th Street territory was generating 40% more revenue than it had under Bumpy's direct control. Nicky and Guy had streamlined operations, recruited new operators, expanded the customer base. The first tribute payment Bumpy received was $15,000, 30% of $50,000 gross, more than Bumpy had been making from that territory running it himself.
"You're doing good," Bumpy told them when they delivered the payment. "Better than I expected." "We learned from the best," Guy said, "and we're just getting started. We've got ideas for expansion, new services, better efficiency." "Tell me." They spent 2 hours discussing their plans. Bumpy listened, offered suggestions, pointed out potential problems, but mostly he was impressed. These weren't just street thugs. These were strategic thinkers, businessmen who happened to be criminals.
After they left, Illinois asked Bumpy, "Do you regret not killing them when they stole from you?" "Not even a little bit. That $47,000 they stole, I've already made it back in tribute payments. And I've gained 2 valuable partners who are making me richer every month. Plus, every young operator in Harlem saw what happened. They saw that Bumpy Johnson rewards talent, not just punishes theft. That's worth more than revenge. What if other people try the same thing, steal from you, hoping you'll make them partners?"
Then they'll learn the difference between talented theft and regular theft. Nicky and Guy stole from me, yes, but they did it strategically. They proved they were capable. Someone else tries to steal from me out of desperation or stupidity, they won't get a partnership offer. They'll get what thieves usually get. The key is knowing which is which. That's the skill. 6 months into the partnership, Nicky Barnes was running one of the most profitable territories in Harlem. He'd expanded beyond policy banks into legitimate businesses: a restaurant, a clothing store, a car service. All fronts for the illegal operations, but all generating legitimate income too.
Guy Fisher had proven to be a financial genius. He'd set up accounting systems, created budgets, managed cash flow like a CFO. Together, they were making more money than either of them had dreamed possible. And they were making bumpy money, too. What had started as a potential war had become one of Bumpy's most profitable investments.
1 year after the partnership began, June 1955, Bumpy called a meeting. Same private room at Wells Restaurant. Same 6 men around the table. But this time, the atmosphere was different. No tension. No suspicion. Just business partners reviewing their success. "Gentlemen, we've completed 1 year of this arrangement," Bumpy began. "I want to review the numbers and discuss the future." Guy Fisher opened his ledger. The 135th Street territory generated $720,000 gross revenue in the past 12 months. We paid $216,000 in tribute to you. We kept $504,000. After expenses, salaries, police payments, protection, overhead, we netted approximately $340,000 profit split between Nicky and me. That's a 45% increase over what that territory generated under my direct control, Bumpy said. "How did you do it?" "3 things, Nicky said. First, we expanded services.
added sports betting, added loan sharking at competitive rates, diversified the revenue streams. Second, we improved efficiency, cut redundant positions, automated collections, reduced overhead by 20%. Third, we invested in customer relationships, better service, faster payouts. People trust us, so they bet more.
Impressive. What about problems, disputes, conflicts? We had a few, Guy said. 2 customers tried to skip on big debts. We handled it internally. One crew from the Bronx tried to poach our numbers runners. We negotiated with them through their boss. Turned out they didn't have permission to operate in Manhattan. Their boss apologized and pulled them back. We had 3 arrests, all released within 24 hours, thanks to the police relationships you set up. Any issues with the Italians? None. We stayed in our lane, they stayed in theirs. Actually, we ended up doing some business with Joey Sedano. He needed a Harlem connection for some merchandise distribution. We helped him out. He's grateful. Bumpy nodded. That's exactly the right approach. Build relationships across families. That's how you survive long term. Not through isolation, through connection. Frank Lucas spoke up. Boss, I've been watching what Nicky and Guy have done. It's changed how I think about the business. I always thought it was about being the toughest, the most feared. But they've shown me it's about being the smartest, the most efficient. That's the evolution, Frank. The old way was violence and intimidation. The new way is strategy and partnership. Both have their place, but the new way builds things that last longer than the old way ever could. Illinois leaned back in his chair. So, what's next? Where does this arrangement go from here? Bumpy looked at Nicky and Guy. That depends on them. You've proven yourselves. You've exceeded expectations. So I'm going to make you an offer. You can stay exactly as you are, 70/30th split on 135th Street. Or you can expand. I've got 2 options for you. We're listening, Nicky said. Option 1. I give you 145th Street corridor in addition to 135th. Same terms, 70/30th split. You'd be running double the territory, making double the money, but also double the responsibility, double the problems. What's option 2? Option 2, you buy into my core operations. I'm getting older. I'm 50 now. I've been thinking about succession, about what happens to Harlem when I'm gone. I don't have children. I don't have a natural heir. But I've got partners. I've got people I trust. You too are on that list now. So option 2 is this. You invest $200,000 into my central operation. In exchange, you become shareholders, 10% each. You get 10% of everything I make across all of Harlem, not just your territory, everything. Policy banks, numbers, protection, legitimate businesses, all of it. The room went silent. Guy was calculating in his head. $200,000 investment for 10% of your entire operation. What's your entire operation worth? Conservatively, $2 million annually, so 10% is $200,000 per year. You'd recoup your investment in 1 year. After that, it's pure profit on top of what you're already making from your territory. Why would you give up 20% of your empire? Nicky asked. Because I'm building a succession plan. Right now, if I die tomorrow, there's going to be chaos. Everyone fighting over territory, probably a war. I don't want that. I want stability. I want people in place who can take over and keep things running smoothly.
So you're retiring?
Not yet, but I'm preparing for it. In 5 years, maybe 10, I want to step back, let younger people run things. But I want to make sure those younger people are properly trained, properly positioned, properly invested in the success of the organization. That's what this offer is about. Guy looked at Nicky. They had a silent conversation with their eyes. Can we think about it? Guy asked. Take a week. Come back with your decision. But understand this. I'm only making this offer to a very small number of people. You two, Frank, maybe 1 or 2 others. That's it. This is about building a core team that can survive my eventual retirement. After Nicky and Guy left, Frank turned to Bumpy. Boss, are you really going to give up 20% of your operation? I'm not giving up anything. I'm investing. Those 2 are going to make my operation stronger, more efficient, more profitable. Whatever I lose in percentage, I gain back in total value. A smaller piece of a bigger pie is still more pie. What if they betray you once they're inside? Then I made a mistake. But I don't think I did. I've been watching them for a year. They're loyal. They're smart. They understand that betraying me would destroy everything they've built. People don't burn down houses they own. 1 week later, Nicky Barnes and Guy Fisher returned with their decision. We're in, Nicky said. We want option 2, the shareholder deal. You have the $200,000? We do. Saved it from our profits over the past year. We were planning to expand anyway. This is a better investment than opening new territory. They signed a simple agreement, nothing fancy, just a handshake deal with a paper trail for accounting. $200,000 transferred to Bumpy's operation. In exchange, Nicky and Guy each received 10% ownership. Frank Lucas watched the whole thing. After they left, he asked Bumpy, "Are you going to offer me the same deal? Do you have $200,000? Not yet, but I could save it. Then do that. Save it, and when you have it, we'll talk. But Frank, understand something. This isn't just about money. It's about proving you can manage money. Nicky and Guy saved $200,000 from their profits in 1 year. That shows discipline, shows they're not spending everything they make, shows they think long-term. You want to be a partner, you need to demonstrate the same qualities. I will, boss, I promise. Over the next 3 years, the partnership between Bumpy, Nicky, and Guy became legendary in Harlem. They expanded operations, opened new territories, started legitimate businesses, restaurants, nightclubs, real estate holdings. By 1958, Nicky Barnes was one of the richest young men in Harlem. His 10% share of Bumpy's empire, combined with his own 135th Street territory, was generating over $300,000 annually. More money than he'd ever imagined making, and it was all legal, at least on paper. The businesses were fronts, yes, but they were real businesses generating real revenue. When the IRS came looking, the numbers checked out. Guy Fisher had become Bumpy's de facto CFO. He managed all the finances, all the accounting, all the money laundering. He'd proven to be more valuable than Bumpy had ever anticipated, and he was completely loyal, because he understood that loyalty to Bumpy was loyalty to his own fortune. In 1959, Bumpy had a health scare, heart problems, spent 2 weeks in the hospital. While he was there, Nicky and Guy ran everything, made decisions, handled problems, kept the operation running smoothly. When Bumpy got out, Illinois gave him a report. They did good, boss, really good. No major issues,
No cash went missing. No territories got lost. They ran it like you would have run it. That's what I wanted to hear. You really think they can take over someday? I think they're the future. I built an empire through violence and intimidation. They're building it through strategy and intelligence. That's the next evolution. That's how organized crime survives in modern times.
By 1965, 11 years after Nicky Barnes had tried to steal from Bumpy Johnson, he was a millionaire. He owned restaurants, nightclubs, apartment buildings. He drove a Mercedes, wore custom suits, had political connections, was known throughout New York as Mr. Untouchable because he'd never been successfully prosecuted despite everyone knowing what he did. And it all started because Bumpy Johnson had made a choice. Instead of killing a talented thief, he'd made him a partner. Instead of starting a war, he'd built an alliance. Instead of taking revenge, he'd created opportunity.
One night in 1968, a few months before Bumpy died, Nicky visited him at his apartment. Bumpy was weak now, in declining health, but his mind was still sharp. "I wanted to thank you," Nicky said. "For what?" "For not killing me that day in 1954. For giving me a chance. For teaching me how to be a businessman instead of just a criminal. You earned it. You stole from me strategically. That showed intelligence. Intelligence is worth investing in. I've been thinking about something you said back then. You said war is expensive, that turning enemies into allies is better than destroying them. I didn't really understand it at the time, but I do now. I've made more money working with you than I ever would have made fighting you."
That's the lesson I wanted you to learn. Power isn't about how many enemies you can destroy. It's about how many allies you can create. Enemies cost you money and time. Allies make you money and expand your influence. That's the difference between a gangster and a businessman. Are you a gangster or a businessman? I'm both, but I tried to be more businessman than gangster, because gangsters end up dead or in prison. Businessmen die in their beds surrounded by family. Nicky stayed for 2 hours. They talked about the old days, about the partnership, about the future, about what would happen to Harlem after Bumpy was gone. "You're going to be fine," Bumpy said. "You and Guy and Frank. You've learned everything I can teach you. Now it's up to you to build on it, to take what I started and make it better, to evolve. Because the world keeps changing, and if you don't change with it, you get left behind. I'll make you proud, boss. You already have." Bumpy Johnson died 3 months later, in July 1968. His funeral was attended by thousands. Politicians, preachers, businessmen, criminals, all of them coming to pay respects to the man who'd ruled Harlem for 30 years. Nicky Barnes gave a eulogy. "Bumpy Johnson taught me that you don't have to destroy your enemies. Sometimes the smartest move is to make them your partners. 14 years ago, I tried to steal from him. I thought he was weak, thought he was past his prime. I was wrong. He wasn't weak. He was strategic. He wasn't past his prime. He was evolving. Instead of killing me, he made me an offer. Instead of starting a war, he built an alliance. And because of that choice, I'm standing here today as a successful businessman instead of a dead body in the river. That was Bumpy's genius. He understood that power isn't about violence. It's about strategy. It's about turning potential threats into valuable assets. It's about building something that lasts beyond your lifetime. The funeral ended. They buried Bumpy in Woodlawn Cemetery. Nicky and Guy paid for the headstone. Solid granite, expensive. Engraved with simple words. Bumpy Johnson, 1905 to 1968. He built bridges instead of walls. That night, Nicky and Guy met with Frank Lucas and Illinois Gordon. The four of them sat in the same private room at Wells Restaurant where the partnership had been formed 14 years earlier. "So what happens now?" Illinois asked. "Now we honor what Bumpy built," Nicky said. "We keep the organization running. We keep the partnerships strong. We prove that what he created can survive without him." "He'd want that," Frank said. "He'd want us to show the world that his way worked. That strategy beats violence. That business beats war. That allies are more valuable than enemies." They raised their glasses. "To Bumpy Johnson," Guy said, "the man who taught us that the best revenge isn't killing your enemies, it's making them your partners." They drank, and in that moment they understood what Bumpy had been trying to teach them all along. That power isn't finite. That success isn't zero-sum. That sometimes the smartest move is to share instead of hoard, to build instead of destroy, to create alliances instead of making enemies. That was Bumpy Johnson's legacy. Not the violence, not the crime, the strategy, the intelligence, the understanding that the best way to defeat a talented enemy is to make him your ally. Nicky Barnes went on to become one of the most successful drug dealers in New York history, worth millions, untouchable by law enforcement for years. And he always credited Bumpy Johnson for teaching him the most important lesson. Your enemies are only enemies until you give them a reason to be your friends. And sometimes that reason is showing them they'll make more money working with you than against you. That's the story they tell in Harlem. The story of how Bumpy Johnson turned a thief into a partner. How he transformed a potential war into a profitable alliance. How he proved that intelligence beats violence every single time. And that's the lesson that survived him. The lesson that changed how organized crime operated in Harlem for the next generation. Not through fear and brutality, but through strategy and partnership. Through understanding that the best way to protect your empire isn't to destroy everyone who challenges you. It's to recruit the ones talented enough to pose a real threat. Because those are the ones who'll help you build something that lasts.